Hi, 5th grade, this is Mrs. Gyoko with your Flip Math lesson for today, 10-5. Today's objective is I can subtract mixed numbers and improper fractions. Here's our first problem. A golf ball measures about 1 2/3 inches across the center. A hole measures 4 1/4 inches. What is the difference between the ball and the hole? I'm going to first ask myself, what is the problem trying to ask me to find? Well, I have to find the difference between the ball and the hole. I see a key word right here, the word difference, and I know difference is the answer to a subtraction problem. My important information is that the ball is 1 2/3 inches across the center, and there's a hole that's 4 1/4 inches. So I'm going to find the difference between them, and so I'm probably going to subtract 4 1/4 minus 1 2/3. So that's my problem, 4 1/4 minus 1 2/3. Now you will notice right away that the denominators are different. And just like when we are adding fractions, if the denominator is different, we're going to have to find a common denominator that both 4 and 3 can go into. So I'm going to use my multiples here to find multiples of 4, 8, 12, and 3, 6, 9, 12, and I know that I'm going to have to use 12 as the common denominator. Okay, so that's actually the first step. Step 1 is to write equivalent fractions with the least common denominator. So I went ahead and did that. I know that 12 is going to be the least common denominator. So to get from 4 to 12, I have to multiply times 3. Whatever I do to the bottom of the fraction, I have to do to the top. So I'm going to multiply 1 times 3 and get 3. On the other side, I am multiplying from 3 to get to 12. I have to multiply times 4. Whatever I do to the bottom of the fraction, I have to do to the top. So I'm going to multiply 2 times 4 and get 8. The whole numbers, so my whole number 4 over here, it stays the same. And my whole number here, the 1, also stays the same. So I've done the first part. I have changed the denominator so we have a common denominator. So instead of 4 1/4, I now have 4 3/12. Instead of 1 2/3, I have 1 8/12. Okay, so that's part 1. Step 2 is to rename or borrow to show more 12ths. Now I'm going to go back to this. And the reason I have to borrow is because I'm going to subtract the fractions first. And you can see here I have 3/12 minus 8/12. And I can't subtract 8 from 3. It's not enough 12ths. So I need to get more 12ths so that I can subtract from 3/12. Okay, so I'm going to borrow, or another way to say that is rename to show more 12ths. Okay, so here's how I do that. So I've got my 4 3/12. Whoops, I went ahead and wrote it down for you. 4 3/12, and I'm going to borrow 1, and that will change the 4 to a 3. Okay, so I'm borrowing that. 3/12 stays the same, but the one that I borrowed becomes 12/12. And the reason that is 12/12 is because 12/12 is 1 whole. Remember, I borrowed 1 whole from the 4. Okay, so I borrowed 1 whole, and I'm changing it into fractions because I have 12ths here. So I want to use the same kind of fraction. So I'm going to borrow and change that 1 whole into 12/12, and then add them together. I add the fractions first, so 3/12 plus 12/12 equals 15/12. And then I have 3 plus nothing else, so 3 and 15/12. Now, what that means is that 3 and 15/12, it equals the same amount as 4 1/4. They equal the exact same amount. They are the same amount even though they're different mixed numbers. Okay? Now that I have 3 and 15/12, I can start to solve the problem. Okay, so this is step 3. I'm going to subtract the fractions, and then subtract the whole numbers and then simplify if possible. It's the last step. So I have changed 4 and 3/12 to 3 and 15/12. I do not need to change the other fraction because it's already 12ths and it's already smaller. So I'm going to subtract 15 minus 8. And 15 minus 8 is 7. The denominator stays the same, so 12ths stays the same. Then I subtract the whole number. 3 minus 1 is 2, so I get 2 and 7/12. It cannot be simplified because I cannot divide anything out of 7 and 12. That's the same number. So 2 and 7/12 inches is my final answer. Excuse me, it's my final answer. Okay, let's practice a few because this is pretty complicated. I know you can do it. You just have to pay attention to each step. Make sure that you are writing every single thing down. Don't skip ahead even if you think you know what you're doing. Just write it all down. It will help save from a lot of headaches and problems. Okay? All right, 7 and 2/3 minus 3 and 5/6. The first step is to find a common denominator because I have two different denominators here. So I'm going to find the multiples of 3 and 6. I've got 3, 6. Oh, I can see 6 is going to be my common denominator. So I'm going to erase that. I know 6 is going to be it. I'm erasing it just to give myself some more room. So I'm going to change from 3 to 6. To get from 3 to 6, I have to multiply times 2. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I multiply 2 times 2 and get 4. And then over here on this side, to get from 6 to 6, I multiply times 1. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So 5 times 1 is 5. Now I can put the whole number back on there. So I'm going to have 7 and 4/6 minus 3 and 5/6. So I just took that whole number and then just put it back on there. Okay, so I'm going to erase a little bit because I'm running out of room. So now I have 7 and 4/6 minus 3 and 5/6. I have the same common denominator. That's what I needed. Now, I think I'm going to rewrite that. 7, 4, 6 minus 3 and 5/6. Now, I notice that when I subtract, I'm going to subtract the fractions first, not the whole numbers, the fractions. And I see that I've got 4 minus 5. And I can't do that, right? Can't take 5 away from 4. So I'm going to have to rename the fraction by borrowing. So I'm going to borrow from the 7. I'm going to borrow 1 whole, and that becomes 6. I'm going to change that 1 whole that I borrowed into 6/6 because it matches this denominator. So 6/6. I'm going to add that together. 4/6 plus 6/6 equals 10/6. So I've got 10/6. And then I bring back my whole number there. So 6 and 10/6. And then I just write the rest of the fraction, or the rest of the problem. 3 and 5/6. Okay, so 6 and 10/6 minus 3 and 5/6. I first subtract the fractions. So 10/6 minus 5/6 is 5/6. And then I can subtract the whole numbers. 6 minus 3 is 3. My final answer is 3 and 5/6. I know because I cannot simplify 5/6. It's as simple as it gets. All right, number 2. 5 minus 2 and 3/4. Okay, first thing I have to do is find a common denominator. I've got fourths over here. I have nothing over here. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead and borrow or rename my fraction. So I've got 5. I'm going to borrow 1, and that changes to 4. And the one that I borrowed is going to change into fourths. I know because I want it to be the same as that fraction. So it's going to be 4/4 because 4/4 equals 1 whole. So I've got 4 and 4/4, and I'm going to subtract 2 and 3/4. Now this time, I don't have to do anything else because I can subtract 4 minus 3. So I subtract the fractions first. 4/4 minus 3/4 is 1/4. And then I do the whole numbers. 4 minus 2 is 2. My final answer is 2 1/4 because it cannot simplify any farther. Let's do number 3. 6 3/10 minus 1 4/5. First thing I need to do is find a common denominator. I know that 10 is going to be a common denominator for both of these numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite the same one because I know I'm just going to multiply this number times 1. And so I just rewrote it. Now over here on the other side, I'm going to change the 5 to 10, and to do that I have to multiply times 2. So whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top, and 4 times 2 is 8, and then I put my whole number down. Alright, so now I have 6 3/10 minus 1 8/10. I have a problem because I see I have a 3 on this side and I have an 8 on that side. I can't subtract 8 minus 3, or I'm sorry, 3 minus 8. So I'm going to have to borrow or rename from one of the whole numbers from the 6. I'm going to take away one whole. That leaves 5. The whole that I'm borrowing becomes 10/10. And then I just add them together. 3/10 plus 10/10 is 13/10. I put my whole number back down. Then I write the rest of the problem. So now I have 5 13/10 minus 1 8/10. Now I can subtract because I'm going to subtract the fractions first. And I can subtract 13 minus 8, that equals 5. The denominator stays the same. And then 5 minus 1 is 4. So now I have 4 5/10. I'm going to move this over, erase the. Sorry, I'm going to move it over because I noticed that I can simplify this time. We haven't simplified yet. So 4 5/10 is where I left off. I know that I can divide both the bottom and the top by 5. So I'm going to divide 5 by 5 and get 1, divide 10 by 5 and get 2, and then put my whole number back on there. So 4 1/2. 4 5/10 is the same as 4 1/2. All right, let's do one more together and then you're on your own for a little bit. 9 1/3 minus 4 3/4. First thing I want to do is get a common denominator. So I know that the first common denominator they both share is 12. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. To get from 3 to 12, I know I'm going to multiply times 4. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So 1 times 4 equals 4. On the other side, on the other fraction, I know to get from 4 to 12, I have to multiply times 3. Whatever I do to the bottom of the fraction, I do to the top. So I have to multiply 3 times 3, and I'll get 9. I'll replace the whole numbers. Write my subtraction there. I see that I'm going to subtract 4/12 minus 9/12, and I can't subtract 9 from 4, so I'm going to have to rename the fraction. So I'm going to borrow 1 from the 9 and turn it to 8, and I'm going to take the 1 whole and change it to 12/12 because 12/12 equals 1 whole, and I'll add it to the 4/12. So 4/12 plus 12/12 equals 16/12. I put my 8 back down there, and then I rewrite the rest of the problem. Minus 4 9/12. Now I do the fractions first. So 16/12 minus 9/12 equals 7/12. Then I can do the whole numbers. 8 minus 4 is 4. My final answer is 4 7/12, and I can't simplify that. All right, your turn. Now that I've shown you how to do it, you show me what you can do, and I will show you the correct answer at the end with all of my work. Okay. Number 5 is 8 1/4 minus 2 7/8. Go ahead and solve that problem. Pause the video while you're doing it, and then you'll see the solution. Okay, I ended up with 5 3/8. Let's see here. The first thing I did was change the 4 and the 8 to a common denominator of 8. And when I changed 8 1/4, then I got 8 2/8 minus 2 7/8. So this other fraction stayed the same. And then I noticed that I couldn't do 2 minus 7, so I had to change that. And I renamed that fraction by borrowing 1 from the 8 and changing it to 7. And then I added 8 eighths, and I got 7 10 eighths minus 2 7 eighths. And I subtracted 10 minus 7 equals 3. Kept the denominators the same as eighths, and then subtracted 7 minus 2, and that equals 5. That's the solution to number 5. Try number 6. 8 3/16 minus 3 5/8. Okay, so I got the answer of 4 9/16, and that can't be simplified. So to get there, I had to find a common denominator for 16 and 8, and I know that common denominator is 16 because 8 times 2 equals 16. So I just changed this fraction over here by multiplying it times 2, and whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I got 3 10/16. And then I noticed, so 8 3/16 in the pink minus 3 10/16. The 3 minus 10 would not work. So I had to rename the fraction. So I took away a whole and made that 7, and then added 16/16, and I got 19/16. 7 19/16 minus 3 10/16. Then I subtracted the fractions, and I got 9/16, and then subtracted the whole numbers and got 4. Number 7, 10 5/12 minus 4 7/8. Okay, so first thing I did was change the 12 and the 8 to 24 because that is the least common denominator for both of them. And then to get from 12 to 24, I had to multiply times 2. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So I got 10 24ths. And then to get from 8 to 24, I have to multiply times 3. So whatever I do to the bottom of there, I have to do to the top. So I did 7 times 3, and I got 21 24ths. Then I just plopped on the whole numbers, 10 and 4. But I noticed that I can't subtract 10 minus 21. That doesn't work. So I changed that 10 to a 9 and used that whole number as 24ths and added that up. And when I did that, I got 34 24ths and put the 9 back on there and got 9 34 24ths minus 4 and 21 24ths, which equals 5 and 13 24ths. And that is the final answer. All right, that is it. You are finished. Congratulations. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.